Okay, so let's just wait for um, Miss Victory, and then probably by 9:30 we'll start. Okay. Let's wait for Miss Victory King, and then let's start at 9:30. Okay. Yeah. The okay. Yes. So this is the link. I already sent that in our uh, messages. Okay, so I've already sent the link, and then let's start at 9:30. Okay. 9:30.
Hello, sir. Sir,
Yes. Do you have any
That is,
question?
yeah, can you send it to GC, the link?
In our
Yeah,
Facebook group chat.
yes, yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, good morning, class.
Good morning, class.
Is my audio clear? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay, good. Okay, so let's start. So let's go now to our Google Classroom. Okay, so this is our third week, and we all know that um, we have only midterm and finals. So this week will be your midterm exam. But before we start, do you have any question regarding our topic, our previous topics? Do you have any question? Any clarification? Yes, do you have? Okay, so if you don't have any questions, so let's start. Um, Last week our topic was the database schema, and I posted our reference and as well as the video demo and our Google Meet and our activity. Mm, activity. So both of you not yet submitted the activity last week. our activity last week was you have to create a database schema that has 5 entities with at least 3 attributes per entity and with relationship including also the data type per attribute. Do you have any problem with our activity last week?
So the thing is, if we are doing it, we will just be contacting you if we have maybe problems on the way.
Okay, so you don't know how to do our activity last week?
So it's not that we don't understand. Is
Eh.
it that is the relationship we are going to do, or the entire schema?
The database schema. Okay, so for example, if you want to okay, so let me open the draw.io. Okay, so for example, an example of database. Ah, did I upload some example? Yep. So this is an example of a database schema. Okay, so this is an example of database schema, and we have another example. We have this one. So in database schema we have the entities, so these are the entities, okay, and then we have the attributes, so these are the attributes. We have the order ID, date, customer ID. For the orders underscore items, we have the order ID, and then we have the item ID. And then we have the customer ID, customer phone, and customer email. And then for the items, we have item ID, we have the item name, and then we have the item price. So these are the attributes. So what are the data types? So these are the data types. We have the integer, the date, integer. We have also the varchar, limitation 12. And then for the item name, we have the varchar limitation. We have 100 characters. So this is the 100 characters. And then for the item price, that is numeric. So it's for the numbers, it's either numeric or integer. Last week, I've already discussed to you what are the data types. Okay, example of data type. So this I've already posted the reference or the link about data types. So these are the data types. We have the integer, tiny int, small int, medium int, big int, float, double, medium decimal. We have also the date and time. We have date, time, timestamp, time, year, and month. And then we have the string. We have the char, we have the varchar, we have the blog or text, we have the tiny blog or tiny text, medium blob or medium text, long blob or long text, and then we have the enum. Okay, so those are the data types that you can choose for designing your database. or your database schema. Now, basically, we have only two or three data types that are mostly used in database. We have the integer for the number, and then we have the text. It's either you can use text or the varchar, but if you are using varchar, then you have to set your limit, okay, and then for the date. So those are the basic data types that are mostly used in database design or database schema. Okay, in this diagram, do you have any question? Class?
Sir,
Yes.
this diagram for our activity, is it us that will create the diagram, or is the diagram already existing?
No, you have to create your own diagram. Okay, just like this one. No, where's my other example? This one. This is my example. So you have to create your own. So it's either the student, teacher, the course, okay, or you can create another example. We do have a lot of examples in in Google. Example, database schema. But we do have a lot of format for the database schema, but this is one of the best example of a database schema. Okay, though we do have a lot of format, like for example this one, this is another example, or this is another format. Blurred. But the format that you will be following will be this one. Okay, if you notice, we have the order table. So this is the table for the orders. We have the order items. Okay, these are the table for the customers, and then we have the table for the items. For the orders, basically you should have an order ID, the order date, the customer ID, and then if you notice the relationship of the orders and then the orders items, the relationship between the two is the order ID. Okay, now here the relationship between the orders and the customers is what? The customer ID. Or either way, if you want, your order ID will be order ID from the orders items, and then for the customer, you add the customer ID in one of the column in our orders, this one. And then for the items, the relationship between the items and orders items is the item ID. Okay, in our example here, this is another example. For example, the relationship between the student and the course, the student should have a course. So here we added course ID. Okay, the student should have a course. So we get the course ID in this table and then put that in our student table. Okay, and then we have also the relationship between the student and teacher. We created another table for this one, the relationship. Now for the relationship of the student and enrolled subject and the teacher. Anyway, we get the student ID and then put that in our enrolled subject. So we have here the student ID, and then we have also the ID of the teacher. So the student should have a subject. Okay, the student should have a subject, so that's why we get the code of the student subject or subject code. And then the subject should have a teacher, and a teacher should have a student, and student should have a teacher. So that's why we get the teacher ID here and then the subject code here. Okay, so let's have another example. Okay, so this is another example. The customer should have an address, and the address should have a country. Just disregard this symbol, this one. Okay, just disregard this one or remove this one. Okay, so the relationship of the customer and the address. So basically the customer should have an address. So we created another table for this one so that we can create a relationship. So the customer, we get the customer ID and then put that in our customers or customer address. So here, okay, and then we have the address, and then we put the address ID. So this is the address ID, and then put that in our table here. Okay, and then for the address should have the country. So basically the country ID will be put in our address table. Okay, so those are an example. Another example, the person should have person should have an address, diba? The person should have an address, and then that address should have a country. Or what else? And by the way, we have the following attributes. We have the ID for the customer, and then we have the name, and then we have also the data type. So for the ID, that is integer. Take note that in our reference here we have the integer, because the integer is the normalized size integer. It means that it will allow any symbol that are numbers. Okay, and then we have the name. The data type of the name is the string, and the string can accept any characters. So this is a string, So any characters from 1 to 255, wala. 1 to 255 in length, or uh, from alphanumeric. So you can put some numbers also, and as well as the alphabet from A to Z. So that is a string or text. And then for the customer ID, so basically for the ID, that is integer, the customer ID, and then the address ID, the data type is integer. So based from our other columns, I mean other tables. So we have the address, and then we have the customer. So that is integer, address ID, integer. So here this is integer. Now the customer is the data type of the customer ID is integer. So that's why in our customer address, the data type of our customer ID is integer. Okay, another example. Okay, so this is another good example. There, we have the employee, the salary, the hourly, and then we have the CT. So the employee should have a salary, the employee should have a working hour or hourly, and then the employee should have a CT. So based from this example. Now for the employee, we have the following attributes. We have the ID.
Yeah.
Yes, question.
Yeah, in this one now, how do we show the relationship?
The relationship.
Yeah,
Okay.
this one you are showing.
Okay, so for the relationship, okay, so for the meantime, disregard this one. I want it to be like this. Okay. This
Yeah, can you
is
magnify it?
hmm?
Magnify it.
Pardon?
Can you magnify the image?
Magnify
Yeah,
this one.
yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So disregard these symbols for the meantime. Just remove those symbols, and then the relationship between the employee and the city is the ID. So we have the city ID. Okay, and even this one, the PK and FK, I'll be giving you the topic for the PK and FK. This is the primary key and then the foreign key. Anyway, for the database schema, so the relationship is from the employee and city is the city ID. So we have the link there. We have the city ID, and then we have the city ID. Now the relationship between the employee and the salary here is the salary, the employee ID. So here we have the employee ID. Okay. And then we have the relationship between the employee and then the hourly or working hour is the employee ID also. Here, employee ID. Okay, so let's try to create another one.
Sir,
Yes.
what I am trying to ask is, in the other one, the entity, you gave us a shape like this one
Pardon.
for
Yeah, because you are thinking about the entity relationship diagram. Okay, so in an entity relationship diagram, for example, in here, do we have an example of the entity relationship? Okay, so this is this is the example of an entity relationship diagram. So if you notice, the relationship of the student and then the teacher is this one, right? Okay, the student and the teacher, the relationship is this diamond symbol. Okay. For the database schema, they are not using the diamond for the relationship. Okay, so for the database schema, no diamond shape, just only pure line. But if you notice in every table, so this is the table for the employee, if you want to have the relationship of the employee and then the city, then you have to put it's either the employee ID will be put also in the city, so meaning in here there should be, so let me copy this one and then put that in a paint. Okay, so for example here, so in this example, the relationship of the employee and then the city is the city ID. So like I said, it's either, let me remove this part. Okay, so let me remove this one. This is correct, and this is also correct if you want. If you want the relationship of the employee in the city, then you can put also here, it's big, 12, 14, 28. 28 will do. 24, 20. So here you can put the employee underscore ID. Okay, ID, and the data type is basically that is integer, because if you notice we have here the integer and then integer. So it's either way. So like I said, the employee, the relationship of the employee and then the city now becomes the employee ID. So that is the relationship, because we have here the employee ID. It should be, the correct way is you have to put the complete. It should be employee ID. Okay, so the relationship of the employee and then the city is the employee ID, because they are have the same column, employee ID, and then we have the employee ID. Okay, or if you want, like I said, if you don't want the employee ID to be the relationship between the employee and then the city, then you can put here the city. If you want, the city will be the relationship between the employee and then the city. So if you want the city to be the relationship, then you have to remove the employee ID here. Okay, and then same with the employee and then the salary. So in our example, the employee ID here the employee ID is the relationship. The relationship between the employee and then the salary or a salaried employee is the employee ID, because in these two tables they have the same column or attribute, which is the employee ID. So they are the same. Or it is also correct if you want the the salary ID. So if you want, you can put also here the salary ID. So the salary no, it should be the same with the table. Here we have the salary, salary ID. Sorry, I stand corrected. That is salary ID. And then here, let me remove, this one to salary underscore ID. So if you notice here, the employee ID and then the salary employee table, it has two relationships. What are the two relationships? The relationship is the employee ID and then the salary ID. Why? Because in this example, we have two columns or two attributes that are the same. The employee ID, we have the employee ID here, and then we have the employee ID here. We have the salary ID here, and then we have the salary ID here. But that is basically, we are not doing that. You have to choose only one. If you choose the employee ID to be the relationship, then this is correct. Then you have to remove this one. Okay, so let me repeat. If you want the employee ID will be the relationship between these two tables, then we have the employee ID and then the employee ID. The employee ID is the same. Both have the employee ID, both tables. But if you want to be the salary, to be the relationship between the employee and the salary, then you have to what? Remove the employee ID here. So you have to remove this one. Why? Because the salary ID is your relationship. Do you have any question? Yes. The entity is the employee. Entity employee, entity CP. The hourly underscore employee is the entity. The salaried underscore employee is the entity. And these are the attributes. Okay, so in our entity relationship diagram, where is our entity relationship diagram example? This one. So these are the entities, right? The student, the teacher, then the project. Those are the entities. And then we have the ID, the name, the address. Those are the attributes. Okay. So that is the difference between the entity relationship diagram and the database schema. And just remove this one for the meantime. For the meantime, just remove this one. This will be our next topic for next week, probably by next week. I just remove, and then remove. Okay, so do you still have any question regarding the database schema? None. Don't worry, this video demonstration will be uploaded in our Google Classroom later on. Okay? Okay, so next. Uh, Let me save picture. Database schema. So I'll be uploading that. Where? Probably here. I'll be uploading a file. Pictures, then database schema. Open. So this is an example, another example of database schema. I've already uploaded this one. Anyway, post. Assignment. Yeah. Save. So this is an example. Okay, so that is our activity last week, and then the deadline will be July 23. July 23 this coming Friday. Okay, yes. Okay, good. Now let's proceed to the actual actual database creation. And so we have the database creation. So for this one, what I want you to do is I want you to download and install the SAMP. So you can download it in here. Okay. Create material for week 3 exam. Let me create another topic. So SAMP installer. Yeah, I'll be giving you the link. So this is the link for the SAMP installer. Copy and then paste. SAMP installer. So this one, so SAMP installer. So here you can choose if you are using the Windows operating system, Windows, then I may suggest the 7.3 will be downloaded and then installed in your computer unit. But it's either way, if you want the 7.3, 7.4 or 8 version. So either way, this is working. But if you are using Linux, then you will be downloading this one, or if you are using an OS, Macintosh operating system, then you can download one of these and then install that in your computer unit. Okay, now let's start. Database, create tables. No, create database. So week 3 for the exam, but I'll be giving you our topic for this week. This is the database creation, and I'll be giving you the link. There's the database connection, database creation. So this is the link of our topic for this week, database creation. So for the database creation, this is the site. So let me discuss first. Create database using the MySQL admin, or MySQL or MySQL admin. So in order for you to do this, is you need to have a SAMP. Okay. SAMP. So for example, this one, and then once downloaded and installed that in your computer unit, then you can see it in here in this part. So click the Windows, and then, or you can search SAMP controller.
Makadakman. Naka-apply ako ng leave ngayon. Ikaw munang bahala dito, sir. Talak ng tulatan. Salamat.
Nag-leave ka?
Paparegister ako national ID ko. Naproba na naman.
Okay, so let's go back. SAMP. So once you downloaded and installed the SAMP in your computer unit, then you can just click here, then SAMP controller. So just click this one, SAMP control panel, and then okay, here you have to click the Apache. Click start. Then for the MySQL, click start. Okay, so it should be running. Okay, green, it should be the color should be green. Okay, then next is you have to go to localhost and /php myadmin. So I'll be giving you this link. Okay, so take note, if this is not running, let me, yes, do you have any question? This size. This one, it's too small. Magnifier. Okay, how about this one? Okay, so like I said, you have to, once you downloaded and installed the SAMP, then you can search here SAMP, and then open SAMP control panel. Okay, and then once you open that one, this dialog will appear, this one. Then you have to click the Apache, and then the MySQL. Okay, the color should be green, and then once it is running, those are running, then you have to go to this link or address. So I'll be sharing you the link. Probably here. So once you install the SAMP, then the link. add. Let's see. Okay, there. So this is the link. Now this is the link. So how you will create your database? So first you have to click this one. This is database connection. Wait. MySQL database creation. Okay, so some let me change our reference. So by the way, this is our reference for the SAMP database creation. So for the reference database creation, let me change the link. So this is our reference. So SAMP PHP MyAdmin, how to create database and tables using SAMP. So this is an example. It's always recommend to install the SAMP. So I've already given you the link where you can download the SAMP. Okay, install SAMP and test your project locally before making it live for users or making online. Don't worry, I'll be teaching you on how to make it online. So basically SAMP is an open source, meaning that this is free, no need to pay. Open source server setup to test the projects on a local server, meaning without internet connection you can create a database. So that's why they call it local server. Before making it available to everyone over the web or to make it online. So this web application development server comes pre-installed with the Apache web server and the MySQL database, and as well as the PHP, the Perl that helps you to build an offline application, which is example of offline application, for example, is the web. This one, the web page application with desired features and functions. For the pre-installed web application, we'll be using the Apache, and then the MySQL. So that's why here in our control panel, SAMP control panel, we start the Apache and then the MySQL. Next. So how will we create a database? So we need to look to navigate this one, which is localhost php myadmin. So this is the link there, localhost php myadmin, and then you can see this one. So here, the next, and click on the database tab. These are the tabs: the database, the SQL, status. So here you have to create, you have to click the database tab. So here you need to click the database or databases tab, and then write the database name and hit the create button. So here, so for example, database is student underscore information, small letter, student information. So this is the name of our database. Create. So in this part you can see the student information. Okay. Okay, so let me delete this one, student db. Okay, so let me repeat the student databases, then click here, then put the name of your database, like for example the student information, for example student information there. So this is the name of our database, then click create. Then once you click the create button, it will create this database. So we have the student information. Click the student information there, and then in this part, okay, so in this part you need to create the table. Okay, what are the tables? In our example, for example, the entity relationship diagram, this one. So let's create a database for this one, the student information, student information table, database. So in our SAMP here, we created the student information. Just click the student information, then after that it will open this tab, this page. Now you can create the table. The table is the same with this one, the student entity, teacher entity, and then we have the project. Those are the entities, but here in SAMP they call it table. So here we will create the student table or student entity. So we create the student, student table or student entity. They are the same. Now here we have 1, 2, 3 columns or attributes. These are the attributes, but here How many attributes? We have 1, 2, 3. Here, how many columns? They call it columns. So let me repeat. This is the entity, or they call it table or entity. They are the same, table or entity. And then we have the columns. Columns are the attributes, ID, name, and address. 1, 2, 3. So we have here, we have to create 3 columns or 3 attributes, then click go. Then once you created, if you notice when you click the student information, when you click the student information in this part, note table found in the database. Wait. So let me repeat. What is the name of the table? Student. How many attributes or columns? We have 3. Go. There. So here we have the student information. Okay. Student table, columns 3. Go. Okay. So you stated a while ago we have 3 columns or attributes. Okay, 3 columns or attributes, the ID, the name, and then we have the address. So here, so for example, we have the ID, we have the name, and then we have the address. The data type of the ID is integer. Then the data type for the name, that is probably text, and then for the address, text. So meaning it will accept any characters from A to Z and even numbers. Okay, then for the meantime, this one, the name, and then we have the type. Then click save. So once saving, we have here the student information database. So this is the database name, and then we have the entity, or they call it table or entity, student. So here we have the student. Just click the student, and then we have the following attributes, or they call it column. Okay, attributes or column. We have the ID, name, and address. We have the ID, name, and address. Okay, now let's create another table for the teacher. So just click the student information again, and then create table. Here we have the teacher. And how many columns or attributes? We have 1, 2, 3. The ID, the department, and we have the name. 3 columns or attributes, they are the same. Then click go. Then here we have the ID, the name, and department. The ID, the name, and then we have the department. Okay, and then for the ID, that is integer or number, integer. Then for the name, that is text, and then for the department, that is also text. then click save. So here, if you click the student information, we have two tables or entities. We have the student and then we have the teacher. Next, here we have also another entity or table, which is project. So in our PHP My Admin, we have to create another table. Create table, we have project. Okay, we have project. How many columns? 2 columns. We have the name and we have the score. Go. Ah, it should be 2. Let me repeat. Do not save. Just click student information, create table, which is project. How many columns? We have 2. The name and we have the score. You have 2 columns or attributes, then click go. What are the attributes? We have the name and score. We have the name and we have the score. Now for the score, that is integer, but for the name, that is text. Then click save. Okay, so that's it. So we created this one, the project, student database, student information database. We have the following entities, or they call it table. Okay, table. So here, these are the tables or the entities. We have the student, we have the teacher, and then we have the project. For the student, you have the following attributes or columns. So here, if you click the student, we have the following column. We have the ID, the name, and address. For the teacher, we have the ID, name, and department. So let's check. Click the student information database, and then we have the teacher. We have the following columns or attributes. We have the ID, name, and we have the department. Then we have also the project. We have the following entities or columns. We have the name and score. So here, project, we have 2 columns, name and score. Okay, do you have any questions for the database creation? None? None. Because your exam, for your exam assignment, so midterm exam. For the midterm exam due date, I'll be giving you 1 week again for completing your exam, for this exam. So based from the exercise or the activity that I give you first week. Okay, so during the first week, I give you an activity, which is the entity relationship diagram here, and you also submitted that already, so it's okay. So here, convert. I want you to convert and create a database. Sorry. So convert and create a database based from the entity relationship diagram that you submitted during our first week. Okay? Then assign. Let me repeat for the midterm exam, because our topic for today is database creation. So I want you to convert and create a database based from the entity relationship diagram that you submitted during our first week. The entity relationship diagram. Midterm exam this week. I think this week is our third week, right? Yeah. So I think third week is our midterm exam. Yeah, I think because this is summer, and for the summer we have only 6 weeks, right? So because we have only 6 weeks, if you divide that into 2, we have 3. So every third week, then you have to have your exam. So this week is your midterm exam. Due date will be July 30. So I'll be giving you 1 week. Yeah, July 30. So I'll be giving you 1 week. Because for this week, our activity for this week is the entity, the database schema until Friday. Okay? And then next week, exam. So the deadline of the exam is here, July 30. Okay? So based from your entity relationship diagram, week 1, it's your week 1 class work. Okay, so week 1, so entity relationship diagram to turn in. So for example here, for Queen Izua, so this, zoom in. Okay, so based from the entity relationship diagram that you submitted, okay, first week, I want you to create a database. Okay, so just like we did an example a while ago. Okay, don't worry, this is recorded. Yeah, this is recorded, and this is also recorded using the OBS, and then it will be uploaded and posted in our Google Classroom later on. Oh, by the way, do you have any question? And so far, none. Okay, I want you to prioritize the database schema for this week. Then once you are done with the database schema, then you have to install now the SAMP and then do our exam. Okay, so let me upload before I forgot to upload our video.